Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the SAME Small Business Community of Interest webinar, Challenges Facing Transitioning Federal Small Businesses, a Proposed Framework and Solution. A couple of housekeeping. I know people are yet coming on, but a couple of housekeeping. Any questions that you have, please post to the Q&A tab. So I will ask them to at the end of the session. Also, the executive summary and the handout, the slide deck that Mercedes is going to go over, is actually available for download in the Hands Out tab. So, having said that, it is my pleasure to introduce Mercedes Enrique, President of CMS Corporation, as she discusses her findings of the Industry Government Engagement Project. CMS is an award-winning federal government construction company that executes a full range of construction disciplines. The company has successfully captured DoD multi-year contracts spanning more than 30 states, Guam, and the world. A fellow of SAME, she is a sustaining member and very active with the Society of American Military Engineers, the Mid-States Minority Supplier Diversity Council, and the Latino Business Action Network. In addition to all of this, she also serves on the Indiana Chamber Board. She has a bachelor's in computer engineering, an MBA in finance, and is a graduate of Stanford's Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative. Deeply committed to the AEC industry and the small businesses within it, it was really exciting for us at FedMind to work with her and get a deep understanding into the challenges that the small businesses in this industry face. So I am super excited to have her as present this amazing slide framework and solution. With that, Mercedes, I'm going to hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank you and FedMind because you truly helped us get this study. So I'm excited today because I get to speak for the first time in full about the results of the study and the framework and solution that we came up with. And what I hope, and I'll move to the agenda, is to give you a background to really frame the problem that small businesses face when they outgrow their small business size and they are federal contractors. And then I will share with you the results of the study, which highlight how we analyzed the problem, what we found, and lastly, to share the solution and the benefits that we see from this proposed solution. I kind of want to tell you a little story of how this conversation got started. So this spring, the SAME Atlanta Post had an industry day, and Beth Harris, Kathy Off gave her my name, but Beth Harris, who's a fellow SAME as well, contacted me and said, Mercedes, would you be part of our panel? There were 3 panels for the industry day for the size standards discussion. And I said, absolutely, Beth, I would love to do that. But if we're going to talk about size standards, we really need the SBA to be part of this panel. So she and I went for a hunt to try to recruit John Klein, who accepted. And John and Joe Schroedel was the moderator, and Mike Huffstetler from also a fellow SAME from my 2021 class could join. So during our dress rehearsal, John Klein kind of gave us hope that there might be solutions that are within the hands of the SBA to help us resolve this problem. And then he had a clash, and Sam Lee stepped in, and he was kind to be part of that panel. But I do have to thank Beth and Joe Schroedel, who really gave of his time to that panel to get this conversation started. And that's the background of how this whole thing started. So I kind of want to know where all of you on the line, who do you represent? If you would be so kind to share with us. And I'm going to look for the results. So I don't see the results of the poll, but I am sure everybody answered. Oh, here it is. Closed. We're giving a minute. So far, 80% of those on the line are small businesses. So yay, and we have a few other than small businesses. Excellent. All right. So let me give you all the studies that have framed this problem before our study started. So the Center for Strategic and International Studies in 2018 published an excellent report, and actually Sam Lee from the SBA took us to this report, where they showed that new entrants and small business graduation in the market for federal contractors remained relatively low. So the number of vendors entering the federal market, and please note that this study was done for all federal contractors and all vendors to the federal government. So this was globally done for any NAICS code. So the number of enters has remained relatively low since 2013, and you will see that we found the same in our study, and that there are very low survival rates. And I think I can hear you, Ashisha. There are very low survival rates. So after 3 years, 40% of new entrants to the federal market get out of the market. After 5 years, 60% of those new entrants exit the market. And after 10 years, about 80% of new entrants exit the federal market. So there are very high barriers to entry to the federal marketplace, and even for staying in the federal market. The other thing that study showed and found is that the small businesses have higher survival rates than non-small counterparts. So the graduation rates are low and have consistently decreased. So what they concluded there is that they believe that the small businesses face a perverse incentive to avoid growing outside the federal market. Sorry about that. And we actually used this, and we found the same again on this study. I'm going to move to the next. The next was the Small Business Runway Extension Act, which was put into law by Congress in 2018. And it was then implemented by the SBA and put into the SBA regulations in 2019. And basically, they said, we understand there's a problem. We understand that the failure rates are extreme when it comes to federal contractors making the jump from small to large. And we think we can give it a fix. And their fix was really to extend the life of those larger small businesses and to move the average revenue size for the revenue receipt-based size standards to 5 years from 3 years. And it ended up that the SBA implementation gave us a choice to use 3 or 5 years for the first 2 years, and then starting this coming year, it'll be 5-year revenue average. So that was, again, Congress saying, we need to act on this. We know there's a problem. Let's see if we can do something to help these businesses. And then the GAO study, which is really what we used when we had that original discussion that Beth Harris did in the industry day. And the GAO study found that only 2.5% of small businesses that outgrow their small business size ever win any more prime federal contracts. So that means that 97.5% of companies that outgrow their small business size have to exit, have to sell, they fold, whatever the situation is, but they do not make it. So those are dismal rates. And what they also showed is that for those businesses that received small business set-asides in 2008, they picked 1 year, then they looked 10 years later, and they said over 93% of those businesses remained small. So the point there is that perverse incentive to stay small was life and true. And the GAO study actually made recommendations because Congress asked the GAO study to do this and to make recommendations. And some of them would be very difficult to implement, and I think some could be implemented. So the first one is to establish a set-aside for mid-sized businesses. That would be difficult. That really changes things. That would mean creating perhaps the MBA, the Medium Business Administration, not just the SBA, and it would require the buying agencies to make significant changes. The other one, which I think is feasible, is to modify the rules for the multiple award contracts so that those small businesses, whenever they outgrow their size, that when those end, the base periods for those IDIQs end, that they can actually recertify and move to the unrestricted portion of those multiple award construction contracts. And then they had other recommendations. Again, you can read them here, but they would require significant changes to the buying agencies, and it really touches a lot of people, and it would require changing the FAR. So again, nice recommendations, but very difficult to implement. Then we reviewed the DoD best interest concerns. And this was published by the Secretary of Defense, Dr. Esper, and in 2019. And he summarized it in three. So we have the ABC. Number one is he said, it is important for the DoD to invest in a healthy defense industrial base. And the reason is achieving the mission could not be done without people like us and contractors providing the services that we do to the Department of Defense. The second one was the National Defense Strategy in 2018. And there it also says that the DoD needs to cultivate civilian workforce talent to achieve their mission success. And then the Executive Order 13806 and the associated report really showed two things. One is that it mandated a rigorous assessment, identifying any risks and proposing solutions to maintain a healthy and resilient defense industrial base. What we really have found is that we believe this problem that I'm sharing with you is the government's problem. And that's why this is a government industry engagement group. And again, they called out specifically in this Department of Defense objectives and alignment that they need initiatives in which small businesses can play a role. So now I'm going to share in 2018, so I'm going back a bit, the Naval Postgraduate Symposium shared some findings. So this was a study done and it was presented at that conference. And in this one, it focused on 8A set-aside companies or 8A companies. And it said that 8A graduates don't fare well over time, that over 60% no longer receive federal prime contracts after a decade after their 8A program expires. And those that remained federal prime contractors gained little additional government business. So needless to say, they probably were not outgrowing their small business size, or not many of them. And then it also actually went further to do a study where they showed, they compared small business set-asides to an analysis using the Japan as a model. And what they said is that approximately 40% of small and medium enterprises would exit the procurement market if the set-asides were removed. So what they were saying is that the SBA and the set-asides that exist are good and are needed if you do want to maintain a small business industrial base. And then they did another comparison, which is a small business contracting in the US and Europe. And there the assessment was that if there were no set-asides, then you would definitely jeopardize and would not really have a healthy business or staying in business following graduation from small business. And recently, in June this year, Biden announced that they really want to increase by 50% their small business goals with SDBs, which 8As are included there. And there, the administration instructed the agencies, so the buying agencies, to come up with and to look at every available tool to lower the barriers to entry and increase opportunities for small businesses. And I would like to share that our solution out of this study, we believe, can really help the government and could help the agencies if this regulatory change was made to really meet this goal more easily. And last, Arshisha sent me yesterday an article, and it was actually in the SAME newsletter as well, that the House has already passed the 2022 National Defense Authorization Act. And in that act, they're increasing the small business contracting goal from 23 to 25. And also, they're increasing the goals for the set-asides under small business, and specifically the SDB, which is the 8A or the small disadvantaged businesses, is going to 15%. So it's aligned with Biden's call for action. And it also does say that these would kick in immediately, except for the 10 to 15 for SDBs that would take some time. It would give it over time to meet it by 2025. Again, aligned with the earlier action from Biden that I shared. So I have a question for all of you. So we'll have another quick poll. So I want to know, of those of us that are on this conference, how many are with that larger segment of small businesses, or you're a smaller, medium-sized business, or I mean, you're a smaller, large business, or medium-sized, or small. So this is phenomenal, because from the poll results, and it hasn't closed, I'll take a minute. It looks like 73% of all of you here are indeed with companies that are on the larger side of the small business. So this is quite important for you. Okay, so now I'm going to go into the guts of the study and share with you the results. So what we did is, all the studies that I have shared with you prior to this slide all address the whole federal government as a buying agency. Our study narrowed down and said, let's look at what we know. SAME has AEC, architecture, engineering, and construction companies. And what we did is we focused on construction. And why did we pick NAICS 236220? The government has 24 NAICS codes that are construction NAICS codes. Of those 24, 22 are non-civil works. So it would be construction as we know it. And the government buys 80% of all of its construction in one NAICS code, which is 236220. So our premise for the whole analysis was, it is representative of how the government buys construction. Now, we looked at remember the GAO study and the other studies that I shared showed how many people exit the market. So we looked at how many small businesses that were winning prime federal contracts were also winning unrestricted contracts, which means they were transitioning. And what we found, that over a period of 15 years, only 7% of companies made the transition in this NAICS code. And so what I'll take you next is to show you, these are those 15 years. And the 224 that I showed you is the blue bar here. So the blue bar, when you average for over the 15 years, it's that number. And what we found is new companies winning unrestricted contracts has gone down from 45% of those winning prime federal contracts in 2006 as low as 33 companies. So remember that perverse incentive to grow, that there really is no benefit to exit the small business. The data is showing it. So a very small amount of companies are truly making that jump from small to other than small. In, again, NAICS code 236220, which is construction. Now, how many companies are coming in? So remember, some of those studies said that it has remained steady since 2013, that there hasn't been a big change in number of companies entering and winning federal prime contracts. We found the same thing. So if you look at this, 39 companies were winning prime contracts in 2005. If you look at 2013, it was about 3,100 companies winning, small businesses winning prime contracts. And it has gone down slightly every year since, as low as 18% of companies of winning prime contracts from the government in construction in 2020 were winning it for the first time since 2005. And we also looked at bundling. What is happening with bundling? How is the government obligating these construction contracts? And here in 2012, we picked one year where we could say 2012 monetarily is the same as 2020. So we said, okay, in 2020, the government obligated in that next code $21.5 billion of construction awards. In 2020, it was 24.8. If you adjust it for inflation, let's assume that bought the government the same amount of construction. So what we found is the number of companies receiving those awards went down by 20% in 2020 from 2012. So again, fewer companies in the small business arena are winning the same amount of work. And then we looked at bundling in larger contracts. And what we found is that 18% of fewer actions, so the government is awarding larger contracts. So there were 18% fewer actions in 2020 from 2012. And in the case of unrestricted, so the other than small business, it was even more dramatic. It was 42% of fewer actions were given in 2020 from 2012. So the government's trend is indeed to issue fewer actions, larger dollars. And then we looked at, okay, what is the trend on the IDIQ? So we looked at every year, but I'm showing you here 2005 compared to 2020. So in 2005, of the total dollars obligated by the government in this next code in construction, 236220, was $3.4 billion, and about 62% of those, or 62% of those, were obligated via single contracts. In 2020, that number is now 40%. So the government is also awarding IDIQs and awarding their obligations via task orders under those IDIQs. So again, fewer actions, larger contracts, more IDIQs with task orders under those contracts. And so now I'm going to share with you the dollars. So if you use percentages and assume the 100% is all the dollars obligated every year in 236220 from 2005, what we found is that about 62%, which is these first two bars, the red and the less red, 62% of all the dollars obligated per year, all these years, was for task orders or for contracts under $5 million. So the majority of the dollars obligated for construction in this next code are under $5 million awards. And now I'm going to do the same thing and show you how many actions. 99%. So here we changed this. It goes from 92 to 100. 99% of all the actions were under $5 million. So most of the, in terms of actions of the contracts awarded or obligated by the government to small businesses are under $5 million. So I guess I want to make one last comment there. What that really means is for small businesses willing to make that transition to small to other than small, it is difficult to build the past performance of larger contracts because 99% of the actions are awarded under $5 million. So again, it's even harder. So now let's talk about the transitioning. So those two studies I shared with you, the GAO study and the UCIS study, said about 2.5% of companies make it. What we found is about 6% of the companies in this next codes make the transition and make it. And we used a slightly different way to measure it. We said, if in these 15 years, they won unrestricted awards and kept winning awards for at least 10 of those 15 years, then we consider that they made the transition successfully. So out of the the 1,228 companies, 75 companies in this 16-year period made the transition successfully into the unrestricted or other than small business market and remained a federal contractor. So I'm going to summarize the problem. We have fewer companies coming in and successfully becoming prime contractors to the government in construction. We have fewer small businesses leaving or making that transition from small to other than small. So that perverse incentive to stay small is there. Businesses know the fact that it is a very difficult hill to climb, and it is a deep fall once you get up there. And small businesses are unable, as I showed you, to build that past performance because most of the dollars and 99% of the actions are under $5 million. And the federal government lacks healthy competition when it comes to that medium-sized project world or to the newly graduated small businesses or the newly graduated other than small companies. And the government is increasing the number of IDIQs, which increases the barriers to entry even more to new entrants to this market. Because as you know, IDIQ competition is fierce and the requirements are very high. And few businesses successfully transition. As I showed you, we found that it was 6% in the study that we did. The GAO found it was 2.5%. And in the case of the CSIS study, they actually talked about the fact that the percent of businesses that fail is tremendous. And then we came up with a solution. So our solution, we believe, is quite elegant. That is the next step for the challenge. We've done a good job identifying the problem. We have vetted this with the SBA. The SBA believes that they could implement this if given the jurisdiction to implement such a solution. So I'll walk you through the solution. Our solution is to create a moratorium program. And if you think of the 8A program, those of you that are small businesses and know about the 8A program, the 8A program has two stages. It has the developmental stage, which is 4 years, and then it has the transitional stage, which is 5 years. And in that transitional stage, small 8As need to prove that they can win other than 8A set-aside work. Because the idea is eventually by year 5, you're not 8A, it's a 9-year program. And if you have not been able to successfully capture small business set-aside or unrestricted work, it would be very difficult for you to succeed. And we did find that in the Naval study, the postgraduate Naval study that I shared with you. So what this moratorium program does is that it gives the opportunity and an incentive for those forever small businesses to make the jump, and it gives them 5 years to successfully continue to pursue and compete for small business set-aside work only if it's over $5 million. And you could probably imagine why we picked that $5 million amount. It's because 99% of the actions are under 5 million and 62% of the dollars are under 5 million. And the moratorium would have, like the SBA 8A program has, it would have thresholds. So after year 1, you need to prove that 15% of your revenues are coming from other than small business, set-asides over $5 million. Year 2, 25, year 3, etc. And you may respond to market research. So the beauty of this solution is that it does not at all affect the buying agencies. In other words, I am a contracting officer and I put out a sources sought, or I'm doing market research, and these moratorium companies that have self-certified that they're small, right, because they're small under moratorium year 1, they respond to sources sought and market research, and the government that now is going to go from 23% to 25% requirements for small business set-aside work, they are going to see that there are more capable small businesses responding to these sources sought and market research, and they would do their job and the rule of 2 just like they do their job today. So again, this proposed solution does not at all affect the buying agencies, and it does not affect the contracting officers and their processes and procedures. And these businesses that are in moratorium years 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 are not able to participate in the SBA programs. So it is not a burden to the SBA because they can't get loans. They cannot be proteges, but they can be mentors, just like an unrestricted business would be. So again, it is not a burden to the SBA. Does not present a change to the contracting officers, and it gives an incentive to these forever small businesses to make the jump because they do have 5 years to prove that they could indeed make it in the unrestricted market. And so they don't have to halt their normal growth trajectories. So I have one more question for you. I'm going to go to poll number 3. And I am looking for the answers. So about 72% of you, of those attending, are responding that yes, indeed, the government would benefit from a larger, more experienced small business pool responding to small business set-asides greater than 5 million. Okay, excellent. So now, what are the benefits of this moratorium program? The small businesses that are currently intentionally remaining small are now finally incentivized to grow, and they have a runway, or we've created a landing. It's not a cliff. I always say it's like jumping the cliff, but you have a small bungee cord. And then small business in the early stages of growth finally have a much better chance of competing and winning prime construction work in this case, because they are not competing with this large group of established small businesses that are now not competing for those less than $5 million contracts. And the prospective small businesses will have a greater incentive to enter the federal marketplace, because now they know that if you are entering this market, you don't have a perverse incentive and you to not grow, but rather you can really resume what I call that normal growth trajectory. Another benefit is, and as the number of capable firms increase for the larger awards, the government will begin to designate larger set aside. So hopefully that void that we see between small business awards and unrestricted awards will not be so wide. And the federal government will obviously benefit not only from having more small businesses to provide, to supply their needs, and a healthier small business base, as the DoD, the Secretary of Defense, said, because now you are giving room for attracting and giving a better chance of succeeding for the smaller small businesses, and you are creating a larger pool of small businesses doing larger work. So I have the last question for you. And I have to say, this is the best forum, in addition to a forum that we did in person at Kitty Hawk Post this summer while we were doing this study, to get responses. Okay, this is brilliant. So if you represent a business, I am receiving 70% of you are saying that this program would indeed give you an incentive to grow. Thank you so much. Okay, well, I want to share that we are going to keep the conversation going, that there will be a panel this time. We have 3 of us, and Josh Schroedel has graciously accepted to moderate this panel at our small business conference. I really am excited to see all of you there. It's on Friday, November 19th, and it's from 9 to 10:15 in the morning. And the title of the session is Size Standards, Federal Survival or Not. We have Tony Franco that will be joining us from Pilero Maza. I will be there. And we have a third spot. I think Jim Schaefer from Reliant Global will be there. He's still trying to work on his schedule to see if he can join us. But Arshisha, I'm leaving it to you, and let's see if we have questions.
We have a few questions. So I'm going to start with the first one. Um, I guess poll two, there are companies that often are not prime but well established. The poll question did not address this group.
That's right. So
It is.
we
Yeah.
have a group of subcontractors to the federal government that may be small or may not be small. And those contractors, because of the way they go to market, they would be subcontractors. The, the moratorium program really applies to prime contractors. So I am glad to know. I think those self-performing companies, if they want to enter the and be prime contractors to the government, if you're a small business, I think the moratorium program would give you, or this program, and having these larger small businesses make the jump would definitely help you to compete to come into the marketplace as a prime contractor. But yes, the reason, Bruce, I did not ask that question is because the moratorium program and everything we did applied to how do we grow the prime contracting small business pool to the government, and how do we solve this problem?
Perfect. The next question is, some small businesses want to stay as a small business but grow and work within this framework. What specific items can you address for this group of small businesses that don't want to exit their status but thrive within it?
I say you stay where you are. If that is your sweet spot and you are a small business and you want to remain a small business, sustainable federal contractor, that is outstanding. This does not change it at all.
Yeah.
So in your case, it doesn't affect it all. When you do your yearly certifications, if this is implemented, you would say you are a small business and you're not a moratorium small business. So in this case, this absolutely does not change the opportunity for you to be a sustainable federal contractor in the small business marketplace.
Yeah. Would the moratorium idea require congressional action to move forward?
Yes, what an excellent question. And that's why I invited Tony Franco to join me for the conversation in November. It would. The SBA, even though the SBA has shared with us, so Sam Lee was very gracious and joined us during this study,
Yeah.
and he reviewed every other week the results of our study. He did say that unless the SBA is given jurisdiction to implement such a program, that they cannot implement it because they are the Small Business Administration. And these moratorium companies are really being considered small for 5 years, but they're not small, they're other than small. So we did check all the regulations. They do not have today the jurisdiction to implement without regulatory approval. So indeed, it would take, just like the Runway Extension Act, the Small Business Committee from Congress said, um, you know, we want to do this. They proposed it. It went into law. If they did something similar and said we would like to do a pilot program, if they want to do a pilot program, or we would like to make this a mandate, then the SBA would be given the jurisdiction to implement, and they could do it. Excellent question. Thank you.
Yeah. Um, Goal three would eliminate small businesses that may have the expertise but cannot show the larger workforce, many of which may do little actual work on the project. Goal three, yes, results reduces small business work and incentivizes large business. Small business is the strongest part of our economy. In time, reducing the smaller firms will only cause higher costs with lower competition over time. I guess maybe it's a statement,
Yeah. So
which
I'm,
is
I'm gonna I'm gonna try to. So poll number 3 says, if you're the government, would you benefit from a larger, more experienced small business pool? Because for those 5 years, remember, year one, technically a company that makes the jump to other than small, 85% of the revenues could still come from small business set aside contracts that they win. And year two, it would be 25% only small, other than small. So they still have an opportunity to win. So I think, Bruce, I hear your statement, and I do believe that indeed, um, I don't think you would eliminate smaller businesses. You're actually getting giving an incentive for those larger small businesses that can win the under 5 million contracts pretty easily and the IDIQs pretty easily, it would actually take that group of companies out of the competition for small business set asides. So
Yeah.
I think I would love to have a separate conversation with you on that. And I'm hoping that I'm giving you that angle that indeed you are benefiting because remember, the SBA calls this churn. So in economic terms, they want people coming into the marketplace and people exiting the marketplace. And that's what, in an economics term, that is a healthy market. What we found in our study is that we don't have a healthy market in the
Yeah.
small business federal marketplace for construction. We don't have enough people coming in and succeeding when they come in, and we don't have many leaving, as I
Yeah.
showed you. So there's no healthy churn. So that is a problem for the SBA, that is a problem for the government, and that is a huge problem for the little guys. So in this case, this gives an incentive for those larger businesses to leave, and we believe that it would bring back that healthy churn. We wouldn't see what the Naval study found, that 80% of 8As don't make it. We wouldn't. So again, what we're finding is those larger small businesses, sustainable small businesses that are in the marketplace, absolutely are dominating or can dominate the awards within that marketplace. So I hope that that answers that question.
Yep. The next question is, seems the proposed solution is focused on small businesses that are already in the federal market. What options are available for other than small business wanting to enter the federal market but never having been classified as a federal small business or having done federal work?
So my best recommendation is the same recommendation I got when we got into the federal market, which is you really want to have to be in the all small mentor protege program. So it's the chicken or the egg. And when you do work for the federal market, for the federal government, you need to show that you have past performance. But you're correct. How do you have past performance if you haven't been in the market? And the best way to do that is to join venture. You can join venture with other fellow small businesses. We have done it. And you can also join venture with an other than small business if you are accepted and certified as an all small mentor protege program with the SBA.
That's good. Yeah. Do you feel that this study and potential solution would apply similarly to NAICS 237990, which is other heavy and civil engineering construction?
Yes. So remember at the beginning, I showed a chart where I said 22 of the 24 next codes are construction and two of them are civil, heavy civil or not regular construction or civil works, I should say. So I believe, and actually I've shared this with SAME after we finished the study, that I would love, and this is Ed, is that Ed asking the question? Yeah.
No,
So
it's
Ed,
Jeff. It's
Jeff.
Jeff.
So Jeff,
Yeah.
if you can send me a note, I will share my email. Ashisha, I think we can put it on the chat if you can put it. Um,
Yep.
we would love for more companies to do the analysis. I want to tell you that we would not have been able to do this without Ashisha and the fact that FedMine granted us 2 licenses for free for the summer to be able to do this research. It's heavy research. It does require a lot of pivot tables and a lot of data, and we could not have done it without FedMine. The data is publicly available, but it's a lot
It
harder to
is.
get. So we would love for this to be extended for architecture and engineering. And in architecture and engineering, the government buys, it's not 80% of architecture and engineering purchase in one NAICS code. It's like 95% of all engineering purchased by the government is in one NAICS code. So again, we found that in the civil works NAICS code, it was about 50-50. So the government buys civil works in 2 NAICS codes, and it's split pretty evenly. But the same dynamics, if we looked at entrance, exits, or what the SBA terms or economic terms churn is there, I would assure you, because of all the other studies that we reviewed that looked at the entire federal government as a whole, that we would find fact same problem.
Yeah. Next question. This is interesting. All the questions are so interesting. Poll number 4 has potential yet again. The whole focus is to grow out. And the true relief for small business is to keep smaller firms contributing without the larger overhead, which always becomes a higher bill payer back to the government.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So, actually, that's an excellent question. And I want to share something with you. I'll share a little story. So, we kept thinking, what is in the government? The government is saying we have a problem, and industry is saying we have a problem. Why only 2.5% of companies making the jump would make it is beyond us. That is not a healthy marketplace. Something's wrong, right? Well, the government in turn says that is a problem for us because competition is what keeps prices down. If I have all small businesses and all really, really large businesses and nobody in the middle, it is raising the cost to the government and it's transferring the risk to the government versus industry. So you are right on that comment and that point that indeed, if there is no competition in the middle, which is that other than small, younger group of companies moving from small to other than small, then indeed that is a problem for the government, and you are going to see prices go up, and the government is going to have to pay more, and indeed overheads will go up. So here, I agree with you. Yeah.
Another question. This program is inadequate to incentivize leaving small business status.
So I have not um, been able to do a good job, I think, to show you that this would be an incentive. I do believe that this would be an incentive, and I would like to have a separate conversation if I could to understand because many of the things that we did when we came up with the moratorium solution proposal was indeed addressing all the comments that people like you made saying, "Oh, this is not going to work." And I'll tell you one of them. One of them was whatever solution you come up with cannot hurt the little guys. We need new blood coming and wanting to come in to be contractors to the federal government. That's why the SBA exists. The SBA has all the programs and incentives to, to attract small businesses to become federal contractors and ideally to become sustainable federal contractors. And
Yeah.
You're saying no, I would love to hear why not, because our solution is still being tweaked. As
Yeah.
you know, there has been no regulatory change to say that they want to do either a pilot program or actually implement this as a whole. We do know that it doesn't affect the buying agency, so that's a benefit that would reduce a big hurdle. But I would like to hear more about that if I may, Ed.
And I did put your email in the chat, so just to let
Thank
everyone
you.
know that. The next question from Ed is, could the size standard for each NAICS code be based on the quantity of federal contracts only and not include all non-federal contracts in the business size standard?
So when we started this research, the premise was, why do we have some size standards that are revenue based and some size standards that are employee based? Why are not all the NAICS codes abiding by the same uh, type of size standard? And we soon concluded that we were not going there. And the reason is we actually looked at how the SBA decides what size standard to use for what industry. And they have economists, they look at the labor census, and they look at the census as a whole every 7 years. And they do in-depth analysis that includes the entire industry in the US, not just the federal government buying industry side. So I think that's a different conversation, and that is a conversation that one can have with the SBA and how they do it, but it is not based on quantity of federal contracts
No.
or dollars. It's based on either revenue-based, what they consider is the threshold for companies that in the US, it's not really based on the federal market, but it's based, the NAICS codes are a US standard. It's not a federal government standard.
Right.
So again, that is, yeah. And Ashisha, I'm going to let you answer that question. I think you'll do a better job than I did.
No, I think you're doing such a good job, but I mean, yeah, no, I think it gets to be a very difficult proposition then when you start analyzing the quantity of contracts and yeah, no. But I think the SBA is trying to have more and more small businesses or expand the pool with the changes they made recently. I think looking at 5-year averages and things like that. So I think the SBA is trying, and truly, I think what you're trying to do in the study is to help more small businesses come in and sort of give time for some of those businesses that want to grow and get things in place. I mean, but ultimately it's a business option. Some businesses, like you said, decide to stay small and it's their business decision.
Yeah.
And it works for them. And truly, I think that's always the pleasure of being your own boss and an entrepreneur, or, you make those decisions that work right for you.
Yes.
The last question I think I have right now is for those who want to encourage this conversation. How do you recommend we engage with our local lawmakers?
Yes. Okay. So we do need to expand the conversation for those of us that are affected, and it's a segment of the market. It is the small businesses that want to continue to scale and continue to be a sustainable federal contractor. So those of us need to band together and to really move this conversation forward. We are taking it to SAME. We will have government participation in addition to the SBA. So SAME is providing that common forum for us to talk. And that is the next step. I don't have all the answers, but I hope that there's a team. So I've accepted to be a PM for SAME and move this initiative forward and to move this conversation. And I need you, Tracy, to help me. But we will be discussing that next. I don't have that answer right off the bat. But we have also engaged the Associated General Contractors of America. They do have a small conference in DC in November 8th and 9th. And this will be addressed as well there. So
Perfect.
We're moving it forward, but I don't have those answers as of yet. But that's the next step indeed. Thank you.
No, that is great. I did put in the chat not only your email, Mercedes, but I also put in the link to the SBA's size standard document and things like that. So it's easy for anyone who wants to check that out. But I think if we have no more questions, this is great. Thank you again for agreeing to do this webinar for SAME and the Small Business Committee of Interest. And we truly look forward to your presentation in SBC.
Well, Arshisha, thank you for your leadership and being part of the Small Business Community of Interest for SAME, and for inviting me to speak about this subject and to keep the conversation going. So thank you, Arshisha.
That's important. Keep it going.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.